a member of Ivybridge YFC since I was 16. Done the jobs there, club chairman, treasurer, stock officer, group field day chairman, and then most recently county agri chair, organising the farm walks, debates and some of the courses. Yeah, I've got loads of education from being in Young Farmers, and it's been a great opportunity to network and learn from other people in the industry. And then previous things I've done in terms of scholarships or study tours, I've been to, lucky enough to go to Wales, Scotland, Denmark with Young Farmers Club, and I went to Canada representing the South Devon Book Society back in 2016, and I've been to France and Northern Ireland with Young Farmers in college. So of those trips, the shortest of those trips I would have done would have been 3 days, and the longest would have been 2 weeks. So the scholarship here, which is the Devon Farm Benevolent Fund scholarship, is an annual scholarship, and I saw it advertised through Devon YFC, and I thought it seemed like a great opportunity to explore part of the world that you might not get a chance to visit normally. The scholarship from Devon Farm Benevolent Fund was for £2,500, and it's available annually to go towards a homestay or working scholarship or work study trip to study agriculture anywhere in the world, and I'm very honoured to be their inaugural winner. So many thanks to the fund for choosing me, and also to the other sponsors which I have had, which includes Dunbeer, Hotline Fencing, Map and Arable Systems, the Worshipful Company of Farmers, and Dartington Cattle Breeding Trust. Your contribution was very valued and has helped me greatly. So first of all, why Japan? Why did I choose to go there? So partly because we've got 2 Wagyus at home running around, and I thought it would be very interesting to see how it's done properly. There's brands like Kubota, Makita, that's a Wagyu. Kubota, Toyota, Makita all seem to be fairly popular on farm at the minute. Certainly Kubota tractors seem to be gaining a fair bit of market share. And Kubota is one of the 5 biggest machinery manufacturers in the world, owning brands like Cumberland and Vicar. In Japan, they're sort of well renowned for having premium food products like sushi and Wagyu beef being produced over there. I was keen to know how this was produced and how it's sold. I struggled to learn about any of the fishing industry over there, but I was very interested in how they power all of the homes. You know, there's a huge population over there and they all need electric. So it was interesting to look around and see that as well. So another reason for choosing Japan is, you know, incredibly heavily populated country, and I suppose I was looking for a bit of a silver bullet with a loss of BPS, and I was wondering if anyone was doing anything particularly interesting in terms of, or particularly interesting or unique in terms of any sales of stuff direct, maybe. Can everyone see it right? Yeah. So yeah, that's obviously an outline of Japan and England. So Japan has a population of 125 million people compared to ours of 56 million. This is England, not UK. A land area of 378,000 square kilometres compared to our 130,000 square kilometres, which is a huge difference, there's no getting away from that, but when you compare it to other countries, the likes of America or Australia, it's obviously a lot more similar. And they have a population density of 330 people per square kilometre, whereas ours is 430 people per square kilometre, so we're more dense. But when you consider that 70% of Japan is mountainous and not really habited by people, that pushes their population density obviously up quite a lot. And our population seems to be expanding quite rapidly, more towards the Japanese level of population, and maybe if you exclude that mountainous area, the population density. So that was, you know, another reason for studying agriculture up there and seeing how consumers view food and what farmers are doing to stay in good relations with the public. There's lots of Japanese ideas that we seem to be copying over here, like the HS2 train. That's almost definitely a Japanese idea, I think. They've got 5G coverage, and we're trying to get that everywhere, and that's certainly something that's brilliant in Japan, even up in the mountains. And like England, it's a very old country with an awful lot of history. I thought... Sorry. Bit of a gripe with farmers over here. We all moan about the threat that imports give us. Any sheep farmer, as soon as you see any New Zealand flag close to a Tesco, you will be up in arms about it. It's programmed into us genetically, I think. So we all moan about the threats that imports give us, but really it should be a very beneficial thing to us that the local demand is much greater than what we can actually supply. I feel that we work very hard to compete with imports, but exporting countries probably work harder to compete with domestic supplies. In Canada, the population density is incredibly low, and they are nearly entirely dependent on exports. And because of that, they're arguably on a back foot to start with. In the UK, we produce about 60% of our own food consumption, whereas in Japan, it's only 35%, so drastically different. And with politicians like, I've forgotten the chap's name, the tool bloke. Yeah, I can't remember his name now, but right outside the NFU tent at the Conservative conference only a few months ago, he said something like, "I love Australian beef." That's the one. With politicians saying stuff like that, you do just think maybe our the political stance towards food security from people like that clearly isn't great, and if we're heading more towards that sort of thing, maybe it's interesting to go and learn what they're doing and how they're getting away with it. Are people concerned about it? Are the public concerned? So a few more quick facts. Japan is made up of 4 main islands, which is very roughly split like that, I think. This is one of them. 4 main islands, but over 7,000 islands in total. And if you measure the whole coastline for all of those islands, the coastline is greater than the Australian coastline. That's quite something. They also love octopus, and they eat 2/3 of the world's octopus catch. So the yen is currently very weak. This was very advantageous for me going over there. It meant I was able to buy more yen, which was great. And this makes imports for the country very expensive. So in theory, it should give home produce a good chance to compete with the imports because it's so expensive to buy in that food. But also because it had dropped a lot in the 6 months prior to me getting there, it made the conversion slightly difficult to give a true reflection of what things cost and how they value things. So 1,000 yen is currently £5.30. So 5.3 pence per yen. Have I done that right? No, 0.53 pence per yen. But I felt this wasn't really a true reflection given how dramatically it's changed before I got there. So I looked at the minimum wage. So the minimum wage in Japan is around 1,100 yen an hour, and over here it's £11.44 an hour, or 1,144 pence. So if you look at it in terms of comparing minimum wages, those two things are very similar. McDonald's are advertising jobs for 1,300 yen an hour in Tokyo. And at the top of Holden Hill, I'm sure I've seen it for £12, £13 an hour. So if you compare it like that, I think the two are very easy to say that they view 1,000 yen like we would view £10. So I thought that gave a truer reflection on how they buy the food they see on the supermarket shelves. If that makes sense. So how did I go about it all? So through the NFU, I managed to gain connection with Yuri, who is sat there. So she's based in London and has lots of connections in Japan, being from there. She's been incredibly helpful, and I can't thank her enough. And she's always been on at the end of the phone to help, and has organised almost the entirety of my trip, which has been incredible. In terms of communicating and getting around, I can honestly say I do not know how I would have done it without my smartphone, specifically without Google Maps and Google Translate. Those apps have been invaluable, and I've completely lost track of how many conversations I've had just through Google Translate. I would have spent weeks at a time just talking to people through Google Translate, which is bizarre, but it worked brilliantly. And the Google app has a lens as well. You can actually translate text with it, which is it's quite mind-boggling what it can do, but yeah, absolutely life-saving. I was there for 84 days. What's the next slide? I was there for 84 days. My expectations were big buildings covered in lights. Lots of robots. Robot waiters going around serving stuff. But to be honest with you, it couldn't really have been a lot further from the truth. There was certainly lots of the lights and stuff. It was very localised, really. The only robots that I actually saw were in the Toyota Museum and the toilets. So I landed here where the blue arrow is pointing, so that's Osaka. So I flew from Dublin because it was a cheap flight going from Dublin, which makes a lot of sense when you're in Plymouth, doesn't it? So landed in Osaka and then went to meet Yuri, and she took me to the British Fair, where, I don't know if you would have seen this chap, Jonathan Jones from Trecroffan Tea. So I spent the next day with him exploring around the local area. He wanted to look around the Asahi Brewery and go there for that. So we headed there. The Japanese people politely asked us to leave, but not before Jonathan decided to walk himself around the brewery first. Japanese people are incredibly honest, trusting and helpful. I had an issue with the card that I was using for the underground system, and it stopped working. We took it to the people at the end of the day, and they asked where I was getting, went on and used it, they asked where I was getting the tube to, and they just put that in and charged for it. So I could have gone the other side of the country and come back and be deceitful about it, lied to them, and they never would have questioned it or looked at that. They would have just 100% believed everything you said. That's just part of the culture, and one of the best things, to be honest with you. I think if that was in London, you'd be charged the maximum charge and sent me away, really. And then I was trying to navigate my way across Osaka on the tube to the fish market, and I needed help. I couldn't understand which platform to go to or where it was, and I asked someone, and not only did he help me with the ticket machine and tell me where the platform was, he then proceeded to walk me to the platform to show me which train to get on, which in London you wouldn't even get a smile out of someone, would you? So that was really helpful. It's great to spend some time there and get a bit of a feel for what Japan was like. It's renowned for being quite expensive, but that's Osaka Castle there. You really no picture of it does the size of some things justice, and this is absolutely the case. But in London you can use a toilet for free, and that's about it, isn't it? But you can go around that castle for £3, which I thought was incredible value compared to some of the things we get over here. So then made my way to my first hosts, which was the Emery family in Maniwa, Okayama. So this is the view from just down the road. So their farm was 0.2 hectares, which is 0.5 acres, for those of you who know that. So they grow rice, salad, vegetables and grapes, and they're planting more grape trees this year, and less rice to meet the falling demand of rice as people's diet and the population changes. There's government incentive to take paddies out of rice production and grow another crop like mugi, which is wheat, or like they're doing, and growing grapes. This is their daughter Sammy. She's running the family farm. She's 32. They were telling me that Japan is really struggling with having the younger generation succeed the older generation's farms. Not only have they got a declining population, but of that population, quite a high percentage of them are moving to the cities. There aren't many women in the agricultural industry either, so it's not very common to see someone young or a woman on a farm, let alone running a farm. So it was great to see that. So I spent 3 weeks with this family, and it was an incredible first place to visit and stay. It made me feel very welcome. They had a 3-year-old daughter, Brin-chan, who I soon became best mates with. She couldn't really speak a lot of Japanese or English, and I could like it. It's amazing how you end up communicating with people, which was good fun. Yeah, they saved me a small area of rice in the fields. They'd done their harvest, but they left one strip for me to harvest because they knew I wanted to get involved with that. So that's fun to do. And then we also made a start on cultivations for this year's crop. And then this is some of the salad crops we were growing, all planted by hand, let them say. Sorry. Yeah, so we cleared this area and then planted out with salad vegetables. They also took me to a biomass plant. I said I was interested in electric production there, and Maniwa City is trying to be one of the most sustainable, or leading the way in sustainability in terms of energy production. So the whole area is covered, surrounded by mountains. These mountains aren't very good for an awful lot, so there's loads of trees grown on them, which is a great thing to go and harvest and turn into clean electric and just let it grow again. There's nothing else they can do there. Absolutely, brilliant. Makes a lot of sense. Clean, cheap, sustainable, what everyone wants. And then we also went to a cart festival in the evening. So there's carts like this. There's probably 10 or a dozen carts turn up. And what they spend the evening doing is running them up and down the street, bashing them into each other. Which was great fun. The whole street just turns into a massive party for the evening. Lots of beer and sushi consumed. And then I was taken to meet the mayor as well. He told me all about what was going along in the city with sustainability. And then after that, I was taken to a sake distillery to taste all the different types of sake, which was probably the highlight of the afternoon. It took me to a local cattle market. They didn't keep any livestock themselves. We went to the cattle market, which was very similar principles to the markets over here. Everyone sits around in a ring, but the animals brought on, they're led by, they've got a ring through their nose, a lot of them are a halter on, they're led by a rope, tied then to a post in the middle, they go round, but the main thing that's different then, the auctioneer announces the animal, says, weight, date of birth, etc. And then all the bidding is silent when it's done with electronic buttons, and then the sale price is announced and move on to the next animal. And then some of you might have seen this potentially in the student farmer, NFU Student Farmer magazine. So they've asked me to write 3 articles, and this one they asked me to write a recipe for as well. So this is called a Yakisaba. So I was helping make food as well, and this seemed like an easy one to write up. So this is chicken and egg with rice. So there's a recipe online if you'd like that. It took me to some local livestock farms. This was a dairy farm down the road. There was coming into the trip I realised there was a big difference in all the livestock farming over there, but certainly to start with, everything I saw initially was very small scale and not, animal welfare wasn't really, it didn't seem to be a very big priority. So you can see here the cows are in tie stalls, so they stand up, sit down. Some of the cows that presumably like to flip their tails around have got their tails tied up, so they don't flip muck everywhere. Feed is brought to them, milking machines are brought to them as well. They might have a bit more automation in terms of manure scrapers, but it wasn't particularly pleasant to see, to be honest. This chap also had, so he had 20 milking cows and I think 6 Wagyu cows. And quite a popular thing to do then was to take embryos out of the pedigree Wagyu cows and put them in the dairy cows to increase the value of the calf. That's been quite popular. And this chap also, he took all the Wagyu cows he took away at birth, even the ones from his Wagyu cows. He just took them straight away and was feeding them artificial colostrum and then rearing them alongside his dairy calves, which was not something I could really see the economic sense of, but he seemed to think that that was better for calf growth. This is how some of the meat is displayed in the supermarkets. This is some Wagyu beef displayed there, displayed very nicely. I think that's 2,329 yen. So they would see that as £23, I suppose, or we would. And then these hosts also took me to the Hiroshima Ground Zero. This was quite an incredible place to visit. Obviously nothing to do with farming at all. But yeah, what a place to go to. The museum was just incredible to go around. If anyone's ever in Japan, I would say you should definitely call in there. Just one fact that I'll take away from that, and that's that when in 1945 the American government had spent $2 billion on producing the bombs before they made the decision to drop them. So in today's money, I did a calculation, that would be over $35 billion, which is quite an incredible amount of money to spend on developing a weapon that you don't know if it's going to work and it's as destructive as it is. We also went to a sumo match. That was definitely a perk. We went there for a day and one afternoon and saw that, so that was great. And yeah, at the end of my 3 weeks there, I did another presentation of what I'd done to the mayor. And then we were off down to Kagawa, so to my second place on Shikoku Island. Got the train down there. So the public transport in Japan is absolutely second to none. There's not a train or a bus that turns up late. They get fined if they do, and yeah, it's everywhere, and it's absolutely exceptional. So this is the farm I stayed on down in Kagawa. There's 4 people in the parlour. There's a 20-20 parlour, or 10 cows either side, doubled up. So this farm, all the cows are loose housed on, they weren't in tie stalls. He was milking 300 cows, and they got a very good reputation in the area for doing a good job. So they built a log house for students to come and stay in and learn about dairy farming. For the college age people would go there, maybe stay a month or 6 weeks. They went to the expense of building a log house. That's where I stayed, and they had 40 people go through that a year, which is quite something for someone to do, I thought. So that's very impressive. So everywhere they had feed barriers, they all had automatic locking yokes. I didn't see a farm without automatic locking yokes if they had feed barriers. Which, those in the room don't know then, that I think is, Sandy will correct me, I expect, but it's not very beneficial to consumption, is it?
Everything's got its spot.
Sorry?
All the cows have got locking yokes and it's no different.
Oh, okay.
Just if someone's not.
Alright, anyway, they all had locking yokes. They didn't have a crush. We just grabbed the cow by the collar and pulled her into the locking yoke, and that's where all the best stuff was done. All the feed there is a total mixed ration feed. The main difference is this. So this guy's farm was only as big as his cow sheds, so all the land he owned had cows on it. So he doesn't have any cultivable land for growing any crops or spreading any manure. So all the feed is brought in from a TMR station. So it's a station where they buy in all these ingredients, mix it all together, bale it up into round bales, and then deliver it out to farm and feed it out. And then this farm had the robotic calf feeder. That seemed to be very popular on Instagram. So there's a train track in the roof essentially, and then it's on wheels, and it goes to each calf, and then the teat is on the end of that black bar there, goes out to each calf, it feeds it its allocated amount of feed, and it comes back, disinfects, tracks to the next calf, feeds the next calf, and it does that 5 times a day, and records how much the calf has drank, and in what time, I think. And then this is piped back to a milk mixing station, which, if anyone's seen them, is the same as those robotic calf feeders. So it's just a different style of robotic calf feeder, to be honest. But very cool to see. He was very keen on educating the next generation of people. He had 2 school trips whilst I was there. It was great to see someone just being incredibly open with letting students on farm. They just turned up. They had to go around, but they could see anything they wanted to see and go anywhere really. So it was great to see him being really enthusiastic about that. This is the bales that turn up from the TMR station to feed out. So literally just scraping out cows each day. All the manure goes to be made into compost, which is then reused back for green bedding to bed the cows up on. And then grab a bale of TMR, feed it out to the cows. So it's a pretty simple routine for all the staff. They'd also diversified as well. They put in this ice cream parlour called Mucker. Making gelato ice cream, which was very tasty. Quite often go down there in an evening. And then just up the road there was a community farm. So in these rural areas they're really struggling with population, and I think this area is something like they'd only lost people from that area for 5 years. No one had moved in at all. So they decided they needed to make the area more attractive. What could they do? So there was some land there. They started growing vegetables on as a community, and everyone would join in and do it. I suppose it's very similar to an allotment, but it's more everyone doing it together rather than individuals doing it. And then this also fed a community restaurant that everyone contributed to, and the idea was make a bit of a social hub. Did some taiko drumming. And then this is us going off to the market one day. So we had a draw of calves to sell. So there's no pens. They're just all tied up and put on the side there. And their bedding, before I forget, is all, they don't use straw for anything. It's all rice husks. So it's a bit like wheat, I suppose, in the fact that the rice actually has a husk. But rather than losing the husk in the field, it's done at the factory where it's bagged up and cleaned, and loads of rice husks available and to bed cattle up on. He also took me to a few farms in the area. So this one was the largest farm on the island. There's over 1,000 cows there. Again, all loose house, but certainly not as high standards for anything as Yutaka's farm where I was staying. It was a lot dirtier. So they had 1,000 cows there. They had, I can't remember if it was 10 or 14. They certainly had 10 loading shovels, which I couldn't believe it when I saw it. But they just spent so much time. That's what they use to scrape up and to bed up with. They pick up all this loose manure and then they take it to this big polytunnel area with a concrete floor, or maybe an earth floor. I think it was concrete, and they spread it out in there, and then I think it evaporated. I think that was the idea. And then it dried out over a period of time, and then it was dry enough to mix with a bit of sawdust or rice husks again, and then spread back on the area there for the cows to lie on. I don't think the EA would really like that if they turned up. I asked some questions, but I couldn't really get any answers from it. Whether it just disappeared and they didn't really worry, I don't know. It certainly seemed a little bit questionable. But having said that, sidetracking a bit, but the climate is incredibly dry. I was washing some jeans one day and they put them into dry again. I couldn't get them dry, so I had to wear them in an hour or something, so I gave up. And I hung them up in my room to dry for an hour whilst I slept. And by the time I'd woken up, they'd dried out. And a pair of jeans that was fairly damp, just the climate has no moisture to it. And very different to here, even on a dry day. So this guy was buying in cows I think he was buying in pregnant heifers. And then he would maybe buy them in 3 months in calf. And then 3 months later, so they were 2/3 of the way through gestation, he would then tail dock them, which didn't seem like the sort of thing that was great for animal welfare for obvious reasons. Also I've never drank tea before I went away to Japan. I hate tea, just don't like the smell of it. And yeah, went to a tea ceremony, so that was a new experience for me. And then, I can't remember this chap's name, but this is Yutaka's friend. So he's a pedigree Wagyu beef farmer. So there's 4 different types of Wagyu. There's black horned, black polled, red, and there's one I can't remember. But he's got black horned Wagyu cattle. So he had a vet day. So he said to Yutaka I could go there for the day, spend the day with him. So that was really, really interesting. Yeah, just joining with routine jobs and whatever we're doing, just being his second person. So you can see from this picture we're feeding some cows. My personal opinion of it was that the cows were all very under condition. But I expected the vet to maybe say something about that. We're there doing things to do with conception and production of cows, and the results weren't great. And I expected the vet to say something like, well, if you fed them a bit more, the cows would have a bit more condition on, you'd get a few more of them in calf, but none of that seemed to come back. And then loaded some fat cattle. So as you can see, Jeff Coker, Phil Smurd and Steve Lang all turned up in the afternoon, loaded this bill up. They load cattle every week, and the facilities were a lorry with a carpet on the rump in the middle of a yard, not coming out with a crush or no bed of straw to push it or anything else. It was, the cattle got this nose ring and then a piece of rope through it, and you pull at the front and you push at the back. And again, it seems to take a lot of people to sort it out. So this is a picture of one of the fat cattle from the same pen. The picture doesn't do it justice, like just how fat this animal was. I've never seen a bovine so fat in all my life. When cattle get really fat, for those that don't know, you end up with a bit of gutter in the back. And this animal was so fat, there was a gutter in his back all the way down, and then there was gutters going the other way. And it still wasn't fat enough to kill, apparently. They're sending them away over 800 kilos live weight. Getting them back half a ton dead weight quite often. Weight limits aren't a problem. But I just couldn't believe I've never seen cattle so fat and also cattle so thin on the same farm in the same day. In terms of diet, they seem to be eating a much more cereal-based diet, and again, all imported feed. But the cows got a bale of rice whole crop at the end of the day, which was something I thought was interesting. We sat down for lunch and had this some Wagyu beef. So this is some from the place they were supplying. So a couple of packets of that. It's like an indoor barbecue. This is some like premium Wagyu steak. This is the top of the range stuff. And the cattle have been fed on some olive pulp towards the end of finishing, to try and improve some flavours in it as well. So this is probably just about as expensive as it gets. And as you can see, those steaks are very small and nothing like what we'd see in a butcher's shop here. Put them on like an indoor barbecue, cook them alongside some onions, and a few other things, carrots, etc., etc. So that's what I ate. The farmer next to me ate the same and then had 7 cigarettes before we went back out. It was quite the diet. This is some of the cows we went out and fed some cows there in the evening that weren't suckling cows for whatever reason. So the suckling farmers out there, I spoke to a few of them, they certainly weren't seasonally calving, it was always all year round, and it certainly wasn't every 12 months. Like the best of them seemed to be getting their cows to calve every 14 months, which is obviously a slightly less production. But they seem to be weaning calves from the cows around 3 months, which is the time that they were starting to serve them, and it wasn't the connection between weaning a calf, causing stress on the cow, and needing low stress for serving the cow, and that's something I thought that was quite a basic thing for some quite experienced farmers to know, but there didn't seem to be that connection. So that product we loaded up, this is what they're expected to make. So that's 1,624,000 yen. If you convert that back into today's money at today's exchange rate, so not what I'm saying it's equivalent to, at today's exchange rate, that is £8,500 for one fat block. You'd almost need a lorry load of that, right? But if you look at it in terms of what they value it at, that's over £16,000 really, or however many hours worth of that. So this is the TMR mixing station I was talking about, the total mixed ration. So this shipping container here is, as you can see, full of round bales. These round bales are maize silage that have been imported to Japan from Pakistan. I genuinely couldn't believe it. So this is the mixing station. You can see they've got these forklift trucks with buttons on. They absolutely love them over. I think they're brilliant. Just go around, go anywhere. Like a Bobcat, probably not as good, I expect Rob will say, but he had 4 of these static mixers, and they load up all the materials in there. So this guy was just a mixing station, so he imported everything. So he was importing hay from the likes of Canada, cotton from Australia, soya from the Americas, those sorts of things, and obviously maize silage as well, mixing it all in these mixers, and then he had a big static round baler, so it fed, auto-fed from the mixers down to this round baler. It was then baled up, wrapped, stacked in the yard. He left it there to ferment for 14 days, or 3 weeks, and then shipped it out to farm to feed. It was a really slick operation, it's a well-designed area and everything, but I just could not believe that all this food was coming from all the areas of the world. I said earlier that Japan is sort of 35% self-sufficient in terms of calorie consumption. I don't know if that figure includes this sort of level of imports and stuff, but if it doesn't, then arguably the meat and milk is, although it's home produced, it's not really home produced, because they're probably sending over 10, 20 shipping containers worth of feed to produce the equivalent of maybe 1 shipping container worth of meat and milk. So that's obviously got a huge carbon footprint associated with it, when they could just ship over meat and milk from America and New Zealand. Quite something to see, and it made me really think about food imports. Certainly, like, a lot of us have heard about soya imports over here. This was some beef available in the supermarket. The higher stuff was premium, more expensive Wagyu cuts. It's all on polystyrene trays and wrapped in cling film. This was the likes of the imported food, and the imported food from America, Australia, etc. was probably, it was at least 33% less than the home produced food. I didn't see any beef produced over there that wasn't Wagyu. All the native continental side stuff, it's very, I said earlier that bullock was equivalent of £8,500 worth. He was saying he's not making any money on that, so you can imagine the costs. So, all this foreign beef then is flooding in and is a fair bit cheaper, and it is real competition to them. So they only produce this Wagyu beef that is, certainly seen and tastes lovely, and it seemed to be really, really good. If they started trying to produce the cheaper sort of run-of-the-mill stuff, they would have absolutely, they just wouldn't stand a chance, to be honest. That's it on a plate. Let me just see what the next slide is. Right, if we leave it there, we'll get some food out. We can all have some food, so we're having burgers and noodles. Anyone with that? Should we do, well, I've had 1 or 2 questions I've walked around, so maybe now is a good opportunity to take a few questions. So someone asked me about chopsticks and also about Japanese language. So the only Japanese I knew before I could go was very basic hello. So konnichiwa, arigato, which means thank you. It's a bit more cheers than thank you. And that's literally all Japanese I knew as I got on the plane in Dublin. And I couldn't use chopstick at all. But when I got there, it was the hotel I was staying in with Yuri, all Japanese food and chopsticks. So it was a case of learn to use chopsticks or starve, basically. So yeah, I learned to use chopsticks pretty quickly. Hopefully that was a bit of fun this evening that not too many people are going to resent me for. James says he feels like he's written a novel. Yeah, has anyone got any more questions that I might be able to answer just at the minute?
What's the price of milk in Japan?
Yeah, price of milk in Japan. So the farm gate price was somewhere around 120 yen a litre.
How much is that?
If you were to convert it on today's exchange rate, it would be about 60 pence, 65 pence a litre. But if you look at it in terms of compare it back to minimum wage, and that comparison then is to how much it is to the consumer. So that's the farm gate price, and then the price at the supermarket is somewhere around 220, 230 yen a litre, I seem to remember. So someone on minimum wage would work for just under a quarter of an hour to buy a litre of milk is, I think, a good way of looking at it. Any other questions at the minute? Yeah?
What age do they finish their cattle?
Yeah, great question. Cattle seem to be finished around 30 months of age. Very big. Yeah, if you'd feed anything, not a lot more than maize, grain and barley and soya for 12 months of its life, or more than that. It'd be pretty big, wouldn't it? Any other questions? Yeah?
Is there a rural organisation anywhere?
Yes, they have 4H. I didn't have any involvement with 4H at all. Chap I was staying with at this farm, Yutaka, he had involvement with it, and you can be, I think you're involved with it from the ages of 15 or 20 until 40. It's certainly a much older sort of organisation, and it didn't sound to be quite as fun for young farmers. Yeah, Sandy? Yeah.
How many people were making their living on that, or not, or was there other jobs outside of that?
Yeah, so the question, if you didn't hear it, how many people were making a living off the first farm I went to, which was half an acre? So Sammy worked 2 days a week in a bakery, and then 5 days a week on the farm. And obviously he was able to take a bit of her time off on a days, you should do morning jobs or whatever, and take some time off. Her father was, I suppose, getting on for retirement age, and he was there. He was a consultant part-time, and then helped her with the farm part-time, but more as a helpful hand than as a unit of labour, really. So I suppose you could say one. Depends how you balance it. They certainly appreciated the flexibility that it gave them. There's no livestock, which I'd imagine being an arable farmer is probably the easiest job in the world. You just do what you want when you want, I think. Yeah. Any other? I hope that answers your question. Any other questions?
Yeah, what are land prices like?
Okay, yeah, I had a land price question earlier. I don't actually know the answer to that, truthfully. I vaguely remember thinking on today's exchange rate somewhere around £4,000 an acre in the north, but I could be completely wrong on that. Yeah, don't quote me on it. I remember seeming to think £4,000 an acre for something. Any other questions? No questions, a stupid question, unless we all laugh at you. No? Very good. Alright, we'll crack on it. So, yes, I'm still in Shikoku Island on the first base. This is, I think we're just driving down the road. This is one of his friends. So this is someone who's growing rice and is planting, I think he's planting wheat, or mugi as they call it. So yeah, this is the Pahara combination of Shikoku Island, Japan. So this is quite high spec because it's got a cab. I think this is 65 horsepower Kubota. Whilst around, didn't really see a lot of Kubota, Toyota sort of machines. I expected to see nothing other than Toyotas. But saw an awful lot of like Honda vehicles and Suzuki vehicles, those sorts of brands. Stuff we don't see over here as well. Cars are very different and small, and like those really boxy, really square cars. They were quite popular and really fun to drive. So yeah, just 1.5 metre combination grill on the back, and 1.5 metre flat on the front. Just run off electrics and just dropping fertiliser down in November when he's planting it. Next slide, please. Oh, so,
Oh, it's here.
you got all the light, I think. And then you tap it.
Okay, and can you stand slightly over the screen to get the video?
Okay. Yeah, this is me and Yutaka, and then someone suggested we go and make udon noodles. So that part, Kagawa, where we were, the like local delicacy then, or what they're famous for eating, is udon. Udon was very cheap. It was a type of noodle. It was very delicious. Yeah, we went and made some udon noodles, and that was more of a laugh than I ever thought a cooking lesson would be, to be honest. Next slide, please. Gonna sound like Matt Hancock, aren't it? Yeah, so this is the end of my time in Kagawa with Yutaka and his wife. Went and this other gentleman, the short bloke, was the mayor. So I went to give a presentation to him on what I'd done my 2.5 weeks with Yutaka and family. Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. He was very interested in what the UK does with agriculture. I prepared a presentation before it went that Yuri kindly translated into Japanese for me, so that they could see some pictures and have a read of what agriculture's like over here. Yeah, he was very interested. And then when I left, Yutaka's wife cried, so I think she liked me. So I was here and caught the train down to Kochi. So I was there for about a week or 8 days, and I split that time in half and spent half the time with a family on a farm in the mountains, and half the week in the city. Stayed in the city in a hotel and went on various trips. So there's a university there, Agriculture University, Kochi University, and they organised a few days out and then a university trip as well. So that was very interesting. Next slide, please. So this is on the way to the farm. This is a neighbouring farmer. So this was a guy in the mountains who was milking cows. It's like early November and he's wearing flip-flops, which shows you how warm it was. So he wasn't buying in TMR and bales. He'd been to New Zealand and made his own parlour based off a New Zealand design, and yeah, fabricated it all himself. Yeah, cows were housed, and then he was just putting the raw ingredients in this wheelbarrow or meal barrow, and then it's got a mixing auger in there, and then he walks up and down with it. Yeah, so very labour intensive, but yeah, interesting to see. And this was his grazing platform. Yeah, you can see some cows in the corner there. So I think it's just dry cows, but it was steep and not an awful lot on it. Next one. So I'm sure he was the face of this milk brand in being a local farmer, rather than it's only his milk that went into these bottles. But yeah, I thought it was interesting to see that they're putting something on it. It seemed like a good marketing thing. So this was the family I stayed with in the mountains. You can see up in the loft there, that's all rice straw that they've bundled up and tied together. I suppose previously over here, a lot of people would have made small bales and chucked them up on the loft. It's the same principle, there's no baler. So they had 20 Wagyu cattle in total, that's cows and calves, and then they had 2 dairy cows, 1 Jersey and 1 Holstein. So this was the 2 parents and their daughter, and then so the daughter had married a neighbouring farmer and wasn't interested in taking on the home farm. So they were looking for, like I said, succession is a big issue. Looking at a way to find someone to succeed them. A farm in the mountains isn't particularly popular, and like tenancies and stuff and share farming, it sort of doesn't exist. You either own it and occupy it, we sell it, and someone else owns it and occupies it. So these 2 other people were people that were having come in to learn about the farm, work there, and with the idea that one of them would want to succeed the farm one day. So the girl in the front here, she actually, one of the Holstein cow, and that was her cow, and she brought the cow and the milking unit with her, and she would only let her cow be milked with that milking unit, so they milked 2 cows with 2 milking units. Yeah, so that was interesting, but yeah, very few livestock numbers for what they're doing, but they also had some polytunnels that they grew tomatoes in, and they also had, the house I stayed in was another log house that was made on site with cedar that was grown in the mountains, and that was a holiday let business, so again another diversification. Next slide. So these are the size bits. So they had cultivatable ground that they worked and grew crops on. They didn't really buy in an awful lot. So I think they bought in the rice straw from someone down the mountain maybe. But this is a concrete bunker and the ground is higher on the higher side, so they went out and cut the grass and they harvested it with pitchforks and threw it in this vehicle. They then forked it out and threw it in the top. So they boarded this doorway up, they threw it in the top, and they didn't have a JCB 430S, whatever, in there, strange enough. They just had a person with a pitchfork pushing it around and stamping it down. There's a fair bit of work involved in that. The Japanese actually love engineering, quite good at it, and a few things over-engineered, but this is a sliding roof, so they can slide the roof across, keep the weather off, but then also give great access into the top. And yeah, you just walk it out the top or out the side into this wagon and then tipped it up in the shed and forked it around accordingly. So their friend down the road had a cousin in the North Island who was a dairy farmer, and I think this guy was milking maybe 500 cows, maybe 300 cows, and he lost 50 cows in a month to a bear attack. Ooh. So, well, their neighbour owns a gun. That bear hasn't attacked me more cows since, but yeah, they killed this bear, skinned it, and he owed him a Christmas, well, maybe not a Christmas gift, a New Year gift, so that was that. As you can see, John Brooks was other. This is a K-truck. That's a very popular farm vehicle. They're brilliant, quite nippy. This is at the top of the mountain out overlooking. Yeah, it's amazing how much detail you can't get in a picture, no matter how good you think your phone might be. So these are some of the oldest trees in the world. I think it's one tree that's got 2 trunks. It's about 3,000 years old, which was quite incredible. And at the top of this mountain, I was going up there in the evening to see the stars or something, or see the sun. Yeah, I must have been to see the stars. And there's just this observatory up there right next to this restaurant, or type lodge, I think, which I thought was incredible. We went in there and looked up at some planets. It just reminded me of the things you can never plan to do, you don't expect to do, that end up being like some of the highlights of the trip. It's quite cool, but yeah, just sort of in the middle of absolutely nowhere, which maybe, I suppose, is the right place for an observatory. Just a bit of an example of the sort of accommodation that the Wagyu is living in. So you can see they've got these rings are plastic, as opposed to we quite often have brass. They've got a piece of rope tied, and a piece of rope goes up around their ears. Quite quiet cattle, but they need to do anything with them, they just grab the rope. I don't know if anyone here has ever tried to grab a bull's ring. Pretty tricky. But grabbing onto that piece of rope is very easy. They've instantly got a lot of control of them. I suppose it's not too different to a bull's ring, but it certainly appeared to be a little bit unnecessary at times. But you can see they're just on stand-up, sit-down, concrete cubicles or tie stools, and yeah, they're tied in there. So walk bowl between 2 and a bit of feed. Yeah. So I finished in the mountains now, and I was going out to the university, but they took me out for a day of seeing lots of different, so there's different types of Wagyu, so they took me to, this area is very, produces a lot of red Wagyu beef, so I suppose it's the South Devon equivalent of Japan. So there's all these strips of straw, so you can see a line down through there. That's a concrete wall, so that's how all the fields are divided up so that they can get the levels exactly right so they can flood the fields effectively. And that's basically why land area is so small really, is they've grown so much rice in so many years, you know, going back hundreds of years. The great way to flood the fields to grow the rice is to make them small, you know, they need to be perfect level and everything, so that makes sense. But yeah, there's loads of straw stacked up in stooks down there, drying out I guess, ready to be cut in somewhere. Yeah, this is the view when you're driving around. It's very, I think, one of the most picturesque parks that I saw, probably. Yeah. And the rivers are absolutely huge. I suppose because of the mountains, you end up with such a large volume of water at any one time that you end up with massive rivers. And a lot of them seem to have concrete walls, so I don't know whether they dug them back at some point when they expanded the cities and, you know, made it so that you then didn't need to dredge them. But I thought the EA could go out there and see that really. That seemed like probably a good idea. This is one of the red Wagyus. Yeah, just an win for fattening. Yeah, got horns, ring through his nose. Don't know what more to say. Yeah, next. And this is a cow. You can see how the rope is tied there, so that put that picture. Yeah. So these farms that I was visiting at this point, or certainly I visited that day, were a lot more commercially set up, bigger buildings, a lot better access for mechanical feeding, probably staff that seemed happier, well, farms that were employing people rather than single person operations, and it seemed quite Canadian style. So this is the milking units I was talking about. So this was the dairy farm I visited that day, and he has his cows and he stand up, sit down in cubicles. And that is your parlour essentially. So you take each one in the train track to the cows, milk one side, flip it over, milk the other side, and then on to the next one. So I can't remember how many cows he was milking, maybe 50 cows. And he said if he was going quickly, if he wanted to go out to the pub or something, he could milk him in 40 minutes. And then I haven't got a picture of it, but so in these cubicles, because the cows can go forward to feed, whereas in a standard cubicle they have a brisket wall, they can't go forward that far. So in cubicles over here you'll see cows with their bums hanging out over the back of the cubicle, so the manure goes in the passage and it keeps the cubicle clean and dry. These cubicles are much longer, so that because of the feed and everything, it allows the cows to stand forward. So when the cow is standing up at the front, if she dungs or wheezes, it goes all over the cubicle. But when a cow does this, she arches her back. So what they did is they set up an electric fence along where the cow's arch would be, and then they had like an aluminium spike connected to it, and the cow would, they had it off, he said they had it off during the day but on at night. So the cow would know if she touched that there was an electric shock coming, but they wouldn't have it on during the day. But it seemed quite harsh. It worked. The beds are very clean and dry, but you also want your cows to be happy. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, it's just the rice bedding I was talking about and some sort of automated manure handling. This was, I went and spent a day with the students at the university. That was quite interesting. They were doing some sort of work towards some tests on semen and also on meat quality and how diets affect that. They had a farm at the university, and one of the main unique things about this farm is it was the only place with a bull. Everywhere else I went, regardless of beef or dairy, it was all AI. So yeah, they had a bull there, which was the main unique thing about that. This was just a demonstration outside the castle in the evening. This was just something there. So this is whaling back in the day. So I've got some notes on it. So eating animal meat used to be prohibited by Buddhism, so whale meat, which was considered a sort of fish meat, was an important source of protein for Japanese people. Before modern whaling, people went net whaling, as shown. Yeah, it looks like 4 boats with rowers on and a load of nets attacking a whale. They're not very pleasant. And I also went to a stud farm, so this stud was a red Wagyu stud in the area. I can't remember how many bulls they had, probably 30 or so. And they were collecting semen to then distribute around the local area. So I said about local produce and that, so they were, this type of Wagyu, this red Wagyu then, they were really looking to push market shares. It wasn't as well sought after as the black Wagyu meat, for whatever reason, so they invested a lot of money in advertising and improving the product and stuff, and yeah, they certainly seen a big increase in sales of semen and lastly sales of animals. Or greater sales of animals leading to greater sales of semen. Obviously trying to get that semen into dairy heads. So on this farm, very strict pedigree farm. And everything has to meet obviously breed standards, so it isn't very clear, but there's a metal tape measure. She went around and measured nearly the length, width and height of every part of the animal to check they were keeping up to good standards and good traits going forwards. And then but the thing that I was really interested in was that they took a nose print of the cows, so they got some ink and rolled it on the nose, and then they rolled this piece of paper across the nose. So they do this as a calf, and they were basically checking it was the same animal a few as they run. So every cow has a unique nose print, just like you and I have a unique fingerprint. Yeah, something I thought was really interesting. Hopefully BCMS don't need to know that. So this guy, he's called, well, they refer to him as being the Prince of Red Beef. So he was employed there to, he was credited with being the reason that the red Wagyu beef has been so popular and so successful, and not just in Shikoku, but further around Japan. People in Kobe, Tokyo, Osaka, they were seeing more of it available to them. Basically, the take-home lessons from him were you need a good product to start with. If you haven't got a good product, don't bother starting it. And then you need to advertise, you need to spend more money advertising, and then once you've done that, you need to spend more money advertising. So yeah, all about advertising a good product. And then coming into my time there, so J Milk was the company with the red bottle with the man's face on. They had a few different brands. I met him earlier in the week, and he talked about the beer tram. So these boxes are called bento boxes. It's quite popular for like a lunchtime thing. A bit like you or I would maybe pick up a meal deal from Tesco. They would maybe just go and pick up a bento box. I wanted to have them this evening, but wasn't able to get any. So yeah, get a bento box each and unlimited beer. So that was quite a nice goodbye. Yeah, that's the tram. So then I then had a break from the scheduled farms and stuff I was going to, so I had 12 days of free time to explore as little or as much as Japan I wanted to. So this is Hiroshima, I'd already been there, so then went and explored basically this area. So I had 12 days, I think I went to probably 10 different places. So back to Osaka. This is like just outside Dotonbori, which is a very popular street food area. That's how big a portion of Kobe beef you can get. So quite a bit smaller than what we got tonight. This is Japanese salamander I saw when I was out about. Just thought that this was just at the railway station. I just thought it was interesting that they'd gone to a bit more effort to make the place a bit more exciting. There's a place called Shoya. This is at Nara, so there's a deer park at Nara, and there's just a load of deer in a park, and you can feed them. It was awful, but so I was too early for breakfast, so yeah, I went to the deer park, 2 hours breakfast, and saw that big building you've just seen, and was like, I couldn't believe the size of the tree trunks that were tree trunks, and holding up as a person there, and yeah, the enormity of that absolutely blew me away. It was much more interesting than the deer. And then you went through that, and then you saw this huge, is it a temple? Yeah, so you saw this huge temple. I was like, oh, that looks interesting, I'll go and look around there. Yeah, like, I can't describe the scale of it. This is at ground level, which is obviously lower, but that's a person, so it's like, it's absolutely enormous. And you got inside, and there was this humongous Buddha, and yeah, it was just, I could not believe how big it is. And I think, if I've understood the detail correctly, that I think it's made out of bronze, happy to be corrected, but I think that piece of bronze was positioned there, and then I think they built the building around it, and maybe carved the Buddha whilst the building was being put up, or afterwards, but like, it's so big that they wouldn't have been able to get it out of that enormous building. So, yeah, like, it was incredible, I couldn't believe it. And this is the most sci-fi place I've ever been. So this is a capsule hotel in one of the cities, and the beds are just like 2 meters deep and I don't know, 1 meter tall and 1 meter wide. They're just all blasted in. Honestly, it's like something out of a sci-fi movie. I was just looking at the cheapest place I could stay everywhere, and I ended up at this place, and I was like, all right, I don't know what to think of this. And I went to the showers, and there's just this big communal shower and bathing area. So yeah, it was a bit of an experience. This is what the Toyota Hilux started life as, I think. So this is the Toyota Museum. That was quite interesting. They tried to copy, I think, the American Chrysler. But yeah, so this was an early Toyota pickup. And then, yeah, one of the only robots I saw was the robot in the Toyota Museum that plays the violin. Toyota obviously have a lot of robots doing machine manufacturing. And I just like to prove that they can make really good robots, I think. Or just really good things. This is in Kyoto, just all these torii gates, I believe they're called. And just rows and rows and rows of them up to this temple area that looks out over the city. But yeah, this is, it's very rural areas, just such vast differences, but yeah, this is exactly what some parts of it can or do look like. And then, there's another torii again just here. So this is Mount Fuji, which is the biggest mountain in Japan, and maybe the biggest mountain in a larger area than that. Yeah, it was huge. That's cool to see. And then this is the famous Shibuya crossing in Tokyo. So Tokyo is home to 35 million people, which is quite a few. And this crossing has, so there's 2 million people crossings, or more than 2 million people crossings a day at this crossing, which is incredible. You see people walk across it, and it looks like ants scurrying. And it's, when the light changes, just carnage. It's quite something. I went across it about 8 times because I got lost. And then someone at a hospital saying that said, I think you should go on a mystery cruise. But, sorry, to come back. When I got to Tokyo, this is the only bad experience I had my whole time away. I got there late in the evening, on a Saturday evening, but it must have been 8 o'clock, I was tired, it was dark. And I went to where booking.com said my hotel was, and it didn't exist. Which is funny now, but at the time wasn't great. But managed to get by with the help of my cousin's friend who lived there, which was perfect. And very, very helpful at last minute. Someone recommended I get this mystery cruise, so you buy a ticket for less than what a hotel would cost, and you go to an island, and you get to sleep on the ferry or the boat, which was the main advantage. I was like, okay, so I got a day out and a night's accommodation, all for less than the price of accommodation in Tokyo. Brilliant. Next slide. I need to find out that the accommodation was a carpet with quite a firm pillow. But I was so tired, it honestly didn't make any difference. So yeah, I just went to an island called Nijima for the day, and then this is the famous fish market in Tokyo. I believe it's the biggest fish market in the world. Unfortunately, I got there late and couldn't really see a lot, but the windows aren't very big to be able to see it anyway, which is a shame. So just for reference, this is Tokyo, and this is the island I went to. So then went to Akita, which is the next place in Midpoint now. So these people are called Amiyagi? Namahage. Nearly there. So I think they're a bit famous in that area, maybe. And we went to the people that met me there from the university there took me to a Namiyagi performance. And as it was mid-December at that point, it was quite poignant because these Namiyagis, well, it's adults that dress up, I hate to ruin it, but they go around to people's houses New Year's Eve or the day before New Year's Eve and scare the children so they're good in the next year, otherwise they'll come and take them away or something. Very different to Santa Claus. Yeah.
I'm not dressing
Didn't really see a huge number of turbines whilst I was away, but did see quite a few just in this little area, which was interesting. A little bit of wind power. They took me to a sake distillery. They took me to two actually. So that was good and interesting to see how they made different things. I think got to try the different sakes, which was a bit of a highlight. They also took me to a small sheep and goat farm just on the polytunnel. That it was the only sheep I saw. It wasn't very many. He did graze them. I'm afraid there's not a lot of interesting detail there. But this is the main interesting thing from this area then was that this was a lake, and then they did the equivalent of what Sandy did with some sheep, and they unflooded it, and then brought in a load of agricultural land to grow rice on. So you can see all these paddies here, and very fertile ground. And I think they did this in the 70s or 80s from memory. But just to do that was quite good. So I think they put in this big sluice gate and then just pumped water out. And then they had an awful lot of trouble ploughing up for rice, which I expect we'll all have in the spring when we go to put spring corn in. But they did it. And then this was the university there that I went to for a day. So these guys sort of took it in turns taking me around. These guys are some of the farmers up there, so it's interesting to talk to them about rice production and how it's different to the UK and everything. And then I headed back to Tokyo to meet up with Yuri again. And had 1 or 2 days to myself before we then headed off to our first farm. So this is a place called Team Labs Planet. I hadn't heard of it before I got to Japan, but I heard of it out there, and it's an interactive museum. It certainly wouldn't be for everyone, and I'm not really into art at all, but this was very cool. Just a series of rooms with all different interactive displays on. It's all like electronic and light and stuff. So there's a room there just full of flowers. It all moves around and it all changes depending on who's going in and out and everything. It's quite interesting. But the most interesting room is this room. So this room is flooded with water up to just below your knees, and then there's lights that shine down on it. And there's all these fish that swim around, and then when the fish bumps into a person, even though it's just lights, the fish then turns into a flower, and then you end up with a floor full of flowers, and then it changes again, and there's all this slightly warm water. It's completely different to any sort of museum anyone's ever been to. It's quite cool. And then, there's a room full of flowers, and the flowers will move, and you go and sit down. I mean, these are like live growing flowers, this bit, and it's all surrounded by mirrors. It's very like what you'd imagine Japan to be like in my sort of like tech and lights and all that. And then I went and did Mario Kart in the city. That was, all very good and fun. Maybe said if you see an orange light, that just means go faster, which was fine until I was going faster and trying to catch up or something, and a bus tried to run me over. That's fun. And I saw some of these car parks. I thought that was a bit interesting. That on hydraulic ramps had to go up and down, just a way to save on space, I suppose. Then Yuri and I went off to the first farm, which was just north of Tokyo. I went there in a car with some others. So this is probably one of the first seriously big. Yeah, so I've been to some big farms. Obviously, this was, I think they were the biggest farming operation in Japan. So I think in total we had 10 farms. This farm had 40. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this farm was 40 hectares, most of which were buildings. So you had, I think you had 4,000 head of cattle there in total. So I think they milked around 1,200 cows, and then the rest is made up with all Wagyu cattle. Yeah, big efficient farm. They were growing crops there. So they were growing maize and grass or silage, and then they brought in other feeds from away. So slightly different to obviously the TMR places. Having just said that, this is maize grown in Canada, shipped over in shipping containers like that. It was very dry. Maize can be quite a wet feed and obviously very heavy. You weigh up before you cube out on the containers. So, but this is, yeah, that was very, very dry, but yeah, buying maize silage from Canada. And then that is hay on pallets. So essentially small bales of hay, but rather than tied with string, they're tied with those bands that you sometimes get on packaging, and they are incredibly tight. You would get a ton on a pallet, filled right up. Yeah, I can't remember the total size of that. Well, I think he had like 10 farms, and they're all very big. Yeah, very impressive, and obviously a lot to organise. So then Yuri and I flew up to this northern island, so you can do that whole like, looks a bit like a dragon, doesn't it? It's like the dragon's head then. The island is called Hokkaido. So Hokkaido is the most northerly island of Japan, or most northerly main island of Japan, obviously. And because of this, it is also the coldest part of Japan. So previously where I was, when everyone was saying, where are you going? Whenever I said, I'm going to Hokkaido, there was only two things that people said. The first thing that people said is, it's very cold in Hokkaido. The only other thing that anyone said is, it's very, very cold in Hokkaido. And yeah, particularly mid to late December. So we flew into Sapporo. Slide, please. Before I then flew east over to the end. We went to a zoo there where I saw a polar bear. Yeah, that was a bit of a highlight of the trip. That was quite cool before they go extinct. And another indoor barbecue. Yeah, quite small pieces of Wagyu. We visited a dairy farm there. So, don't think I just said that. Because it's so cold there, it's not suitable for rice production. So they've never put in loads of rice paddies. So there's like rolling fields, a bit like you'd see in flatter areas of Devon. The whole area reminded me of Canada, really. So because they've got like big, sizable, croppable fields, they're then able to grow crops and farm very commercially. And they're importing very little feed, making a lot of produce, and making a lot of money as well, it seems to be. So yeah, this guy had 4 or 5 robots. This was actually a collaboration of some smaller farmers that decided they'd work together. So they put one unit in on, I don't know if they decided to split some land up or quite how they did it, but it was 4 or 5 farmers that were running this as a joint venture then. So that was quite interesting to see. This isn't actually concrete, well it is concrete then, but it's covered in rubber mats and then scraped. But very, very, very similar to robotic dairy farm you see over here. With the exception of these vending machines. So these vending machines are actually on farm. So they love vending machines in Japan. It's all cash, there's no contactless. The whole society is very cash based, which is annoying. When you get used to just tapping your card everywhere, yeah, brilliant. But anyway, so yeah, I couldn't believe they have vending machines on farm. It seems mad, but yeah, interesting, isn't it? And then they were taking, so this is for cubicle bedding. Would anyone like to hazard a guess as to what it might be? No, so this is coffee waste from Costa. So they were taking that and they were spreading that on cubicle mats. So yeah, we spent 4 or 5 days there, I would have thought, before I then flew east to Abetsu. which is my final destination. Yakisaba. Yes, please. I'm quite a big fan of fish and chips. The closest thing I could find to it when I was over there was tempura, which is a way of frying food, and obviously eat a lot of fish, so you get that. It's hard to find fish and chips. So we're having a welcoming meal with these people. So there's a guy there, this big group of farmers basically used it as a bit of an excuse to have a big social, to go out and eat a load of food. So I was quite excited when they were bringing out chips, and obviously saw some fried fish. Well, I could just see it was fried, and that was enough for me. But so I ate this. Wasn't particularly impressed with it, and it's actually cod testicles. Which, tasted as good as they sound, to be honest. So this was the dairy farm I was staying on, so I must have been there around 10 days, 12 days. So I got there just before Christmas. So the plan there was to work for like 5 days with the farm staff, and then go back to the owner's mother's house and stay there for the rest of my time and celebrate the New Year and everything with them. So Christmas isn't a thing over there really at all, but New Year is a very big thing. Lots of cows. They were growing all their own feed with the exception of maybe soya. Milking 550 cows, all indoor house, cow all year round. So this was a big bungalow they built for the Chinese staff. So this bungalow is called, they just referred to it as China, because the Chinese staff lived in it. And then there's a caravan type thing just behind it that a Mongolian couple lived in. So that was called Mongolia. I was going to say about staff. So like of all the places I went, just living with the staff was brilliant. Like they didn't speak a smidge of English. They hardly spoke Japanese, to be honest. They did speak Japanese, but we couldn't communicate at all. But that sort of made it better in a lot of ways. I can't quite describe how. But got there Christmas Eve, or the day before Christmas Eve, and then worked on. So there was let's say I was there for 5 days. It was in 5 main areas of the farm. So I would do 2 shifts on each area. So that was interesting. As you can see, it's quite cold. They start at 4 AM, finish at 8 AM, and they then go back to bed, and then they start at 4 PM and finish again at 8 PM, and that's the working week. I suppose I found this quite different because they were, foreign staff that have come for the purpose of a better life. So one bloke there has been working there for 10 years. And he tries to go back every year for a fortnight, and he has a 6-year-old son, so he obviously doesn't see a lot of them. But the 2 Mongolians, they had left Mongolia 2 years before. As soon as they got to this farm, they didn't speak a word of Japanese. They didn't really have any livestock skills, which was absolutely exceptional character in my opinion. And from when they got there, they hadn't had a day off from when they landed, and that obviously meant that they hadn't seen their daughters for 2 years either. So they were there to work, and I really felt for them. I couldn't believe that they would do it, but just anything to give their children a better life. And really, the big thing they wanted to do is to be able to afford to give their children English lessons. The goal was that maybe they'd be able to. So I think they had a 3-year visa there. The idea was that they'd like to be able to get a visa to go and work on a dairy farm in an English-speaking country. But to get there, to learn Japanese, learn to care for it, and just work away like they did was quite incredible. The beds, they didn't have mattresses on these beds. It was a sheet of plywood. It was then a duvet, and then you got in it, and then there was another duvet. So getting up in the morning was not an issue. Next slide, please. This is the parlour, 40-40, so 20 cows each side, 20 units each side, rapid exit. Very good, very modern parlour, certainly very different to the people that are walking the units around milking cows at the same time. And it's quite bizarre to think that in the same country on almost exactly the same milk price. There's a lot less population in the north on this island, so there's a slightly lower milk price because they've got to get it there, so maybe 20 yen a litre less. What was I going with that? But, oh yeah, so they're on a very similar milk price, but it seems like it's economical for people to be able to milk cows on a tiny scale, yet also there's opportunity for people to milk cows on like a really serious commercial scale where they're, it was quite clearly making a lot of money really. Did some calf rooming, so this calf room building is very airy, just like you want calf room building to be, concrete floor and stuff. So if you ever tipped over a bucket of water, you cleaned it up very, very quickly, because otherwise it would just turn to a sheet ice in absolutely seconds. Freezing cold in there. Just a bottle to each calf as you went round, it's quite good and quick. The first night there, the Chinese were excited to have me, so they threw me a big Chinese welcome party, which was lovely. So lots of welcome parties and leaving parties during my whole trip, as you can see, so I probably did put on a little bit of weight, to be honest. Christmas Eve, one of the chaps took me up to the mountains there for a walk around during the day, so this is when the Japanese celebrated Christmas in like the small way they do. So Christmas Eve is the day that Santa Claus comes and gives well-behaved children a present in Japan. And I explained to the family that in England, Santa Claus comes on Christmas Eve, everyone that's well-behaved gets a present and gets it on Christmas Day. Because I said that everyone gets a present, they then thought, we better get this bloke a present. And they got me this napkin with cats on it, which is obviously my favourite present. And then Christmas Day, all the shops were open. I went and bought some food to try and cook some food for Christmas lunch for everyone. I did cook Christmas dinner once, but I'm not a chef. So that was interesting. So I think I bought some carrots and potatoes, and then the host gave me some beef, which was nice. And then the newspaper in the afternoon of Christmas Day, went to the shops. Christmas Day, went to the shops, which I couldn't believe, and then in the afternoon, this lady from the newspaper came to do a report on me on what I'd done in Hokkaido, which was interesting. Certainly not your average Christmas Day. And then this was Christmas Day, and I took some napkins with me beforehand, and we all had. They said they weren't really interested in the Christmas meal, which certainly relieved me of the cooking. So they just did a big Chinese feast again, which was great. I didn't know anyone's names at all. I couldn't understand. So I just decided to name them. So I called this bloke Gordon because he was always cooking. So after Gordon Ramsay. And that bloke was always smoking, so he was called Smokey. And then Mike the Mongolian as well. So for Wagyu beef to be classified as Wagyu, it needs to be a heifer or a steer. So they have to castrate everything. For whatever reason, they haven't found rubber rings over there. So they surgically castrate everything when they get to, 11 or 12 months of age. So I went along to witness that, or see what that was about, and it was brutal, literally just grabbed the base of the sack, cut the entire base of the sack off, pulled the stones out. I think they sprayed some iodine on and then gave it some pen strap. So I haven't said anything about any pain relief there, because they didn't use any. Not very, I felt sorry for those boys. So that was the end of my time at the farm. So they sent me on a night away to a very nice hotel where there was a fish that looked like it had just been pulled out of the water and thrown in a deep fat fryer. It tastes nice. We got to dress up in a kimono. Went snowmobiling for a bit. And then this was the 30th of December, so this was bonfire day, or fireworks night even. So we spent the day with a load of local farmers down at the equivalent of the village green, I suppose, setting up a load of fireworks stuff for the evening entertainment, and all the farm staff went to that. And then New Year's Day, that was the big day over there. All the farm staff came over, everyone got quite a healthy cash tip, And yeah, just a big old feed there at lunchtime. It's great. Yeah, real community atmosphere, a bit like Christmas Day over here, really, to be honest. Which was fine until obviously the tsunami news. The first I heard of it was a friend over here sending me a message saying, "Are you okay?" But yeah, they had this on the TV and I hadn't really twigged what it was about. But yeah, that was not really what I wanted to be seeing just before I left, to be honest. But we were, a long, long way away from it, which was fine. So I didn't have a visa. I was just there on a holiday visa. So that meant I could only spend 90 days in the country. So I spent 84 days in Japan. I took 8,500 photos. So that took a lot of sifting through. So there's probably 8,350 photos you haven't seen. Boy with, but yeah. So I spoke to Pete, my brother, after 2 months and said, "I need to be booking a flight somewhere else. What's the plan? How are you coping?" Pete said, "Yeah, fine, to be honest, I haven't had to do very many repairs since you've been away." So he said, "If you want to stay away until we start lambing, pretty well fine, really." So yeah, decided I'd venture over to New Zealand and see what that's about. A lot of people are raved about that, so I thought it'd be fun. So back in the airport, I decided to treat myself to a McDonald's. So yeah, teriyaki McBurger. They also do I think it's shrimp burgers, which it's just little things like that you notice when you go to a restaurant that you recognise, I suppose.
Is it at all possible for us to bring out the ice cream?
Yeah, okay.
Do we just carry on while we do it? Or
Yeah, sure. I can't not talk about the toilets in Japan. The toilets were probably, no, they weren't my favourite thing, but they were certainly they're just so much better than the UK toilets. They're very electric. There's a control panel there to do anything you can imagine to do and more, to be honest with you. So you can have a heated seat, electric seat up and down. You can get it to play a bit of music if you're going to be a bit noisy. And obviously you can ask it to wash your bum and then it will wash the toilet as well. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Everyone should have it. Yeah. So a few take-homes. What have I taken home from this trip then? Hello. So yeah, a few take-homes. What have I taken home and learned? So certainly something I took home and was emphasised more when I got to the final place and speaking to the Chinese Mongolians was that don't realise how lucky we are to be born in a first world country. That's something I felt very fortunate of, certainly towards the end. And also just learning English, to be able to speak and read English, with people, parents going out there to literally to work to earn twice the wage they'd earn at home, just to pretty much just be able to give their children a better education to learn English. I know it seems like an obvious thing to say, or it might seem like an obvious thing to say, but I really felt very lucky when I was speaking to those people. And that was also a big benefit in Japan because all of the signs is in Japanese, and then an awful lot of the signs also have English below them, and or English pronunciation of the Japanese word, which was, very, very helpful. I'll come back to producing food in a country with such high demand and complain about imports. I think that's something that they found good about Japan, about being there, and I really do think that's something that we, as farmers, just completely overlook. We can moan about it, but we can certainly compete with them if we don't have to pay to ship it from the other side of the world, or even half the other side of the world, really. the other big thing, we have problems over here, but realistically, most of our problems over here can be solved with money or most of our problems have to do with problems within politics, in all honesty, and getting rules changed and those sorts of things. We don't really have to worry about natural disasters, and that's something I think we're incredibly lucky for. And certainly with that tsunami scare, that was certainly something I thought about. People were asking me, does England have earthquakes? Does England have tornadoes? Does England have hurricanes? Does England have bears? We have none of those things. Like, we have things that cause us problems, but I'm not afraid to say anything about TB. If it was for a change in politics, would we have a problem with TB? Possibly not. Whereas you've got bears roaming around and hurricanes happening. Very different, isn't it? And then education. So at the beginning of this presentation, I spoke quite a lot about the education I've received, and I didn't speak about that as any sort of like boast or for anyone to think, oh, I know what I'm talking about or anything like that. No, that was so that I could come back to this point at the end. So what I've learned, having been there and seen these people that I thought didn't know things that I found maybe quite obvious, I realised how lucky I was to have been able to go to college and learn some pretty good grounders at college, to be able to learn from my dad from when I was only knee high, to be able to go to young farmers and share ideas with other people, and it made me realise how good an education I've been able to have and how good an education we actually offer in agriculture in this country. Maybe that's the sort of thing that we sort of take for granted a little bit in an English-speaking country. So I then flew to New Zealand and I thought that the education over there was a whole another level again. And it was just a whole another level higher, particularly around grazing and stuff. So yeah, certainly a big thing I took home is just how lucky we are to be able to share ideas and pass things on to each other as easy as we do, and how much we know about these things. And maybe that's because I've got a very questioning attitude. And maybe that's because Japanese people are quite innocent with things. I'm not sure. Regardless of what I said about anything to do with welfare and the standards there not being particularly high, and absolutely nothing near as high as British standards, not by an absolute mile. It doesn't take away from the fact that these farmers really did care about their livestock. They really genuinely thought they were doing the best thing. And I suppose that goes back to education again, is that if they had been told that this is a good way of doing things, or this is the best way of doing things, then they would believe that. When they were feeding these animals all this feed and taking them to these terrific weights, it wasn't for any sort of profitable thing. The first thing they thought of is how it will affect the quality of what they're producing, and how well the animals will be grown, and mainly for consumer interest rather than for their own production interests, whereas New Zealand was like completely opposite. It's all about what it costs and what you get out of it. So two very different things there. So I'll just very quickly say a little bit about New Zealand. So flew to New Zealand, hadn't seen any South Devon cattle for 84 days, so flew straight to, looking around the room, your cousins, which is Ipurua, South Devon, in Aria. He came and picked me up from the airport. Really nice people, the Foss family. His father was from Rangiton originally. And so I was looking for a job in New Zealand, paid for a visa, booked a flight, and contacted Peter Foss just by chance, just because I follow his Facebook page. Sent him a message, do anyone looking for any work? It was pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. And he's like, can't help you with that, but if you need someone to pick you up from the airport, I'll pick you up from the airport, you can stay here as long as you want. So yeah, he was absolutely golden to me. So picked me up from the airport, and I just assumed it was fairly close. And he's like, right, well, it's 3 hours back to mine. Yeah, he'd driven 6 hours to pick up some random bloke from there, which was quite incredible. So yeah, I spent a few days with them, so that was great. And then then managed to land myself a job on a dairy farm just outside Rotorua, milking 550 cows, which was very good. Yeah, this is the last slide. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.